terrorists have been using of late is again making use of mobs, that wherever they are holed up in a house, in a safe house somewhere, some of their supporters, the moment they get to know that the army is drawing up into that village or into those set of houses to lay up cordon, they send out a call on the local mosque, the PA system of the mosque.
In this deeply insightful video, General Hasnain shares with us the tactics which have been used and evolved by the terrorists in Jammu and Kashmir over the last 30 years, starting from 1989.
You will be surprised, but in my case, I've seen some of the Pakistani terrorists who are actually HIV patients. They have been promised that go and fight jihad. You're going to die anyway, so why don't you do something for your family? This is the money you can take, and you will die and go to Jannah.
By the end of the interview, we will know more about Fidains, or what army calls so-called Fidain.
If you remember what happened in Uri in 2016 was a Fidain attack.
Difference between suicide bombing and suicide attacks.
They came dressed as RR soldiers. They came with a combat dress of the Indian Army and putting on RR on their shoulder.
The important role played by IED in terrorism, agitational terrorism, and much more.
The American Army called me to speak about IEDs to them. The American Army in the year 2000 had not heard of what an IED is.
Hi, this is Ruchi Singh and you're watching the Ruchi Connect. Together creating an inspired life. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe and click on the notification bell so that you get notified whenever there are new videos. So let's jump into it. It is my absolute honor to have Lieutenant General Hasnain once again on my show. He is one of the legends of the Indian Army. His expertise and vast experience in defense and strategy are next to none. But what amazes me is his humility and the sheer depth of knowledge he carries. Thank you so much, sir, for doing this.
It's great to be back. This is a little experiment that we did between Ruchi and myself seems to have really hit off. And the whole idea was to actually expand on issues which are of a regular nature, the type of queries which come to me on social media and which cannot be answered in 280 letters. So we decided to use this format. And you can see from the queries that I'm getting, obviously Ruchi is doing a great job in absorbing these, editing them, sending them out to me, and doing a tremendous amount of technical work after we have done our recording. Come back and listen to more of Ruchi Singh talks.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, can you share some of the tactics which have been used by terrorists to create terror in Jammu and Kashmir in the past, which we should be careful of in the present scenario?
See, Ruchi, this conflict, what we call the proxy conflict in Kashmir, is now almost 30 years old. So obviously, in 30 years, the tactics of the terrorists cannot be static. It's a very dynamic situation, and based upon the emerging environment, tactics keep changing. Similarly, the army, the Indian Army, also changes all its counter tactics, which we use to counter the issue of of terrorists and terrorism. Let me start from 89. It started with a bit of a mass uprising. A lot of instigation, a lot of street protests, but very shortly it went back into primarily terrorists in the field, the jungles, the mountains, in the rural areas, and many of them in the urban areas of places like Srinagar, Anantnag, etc. So it was a multifaceted kind of a terror campaign which has been followed. And one of the major things that they've had is they've had ideological backing from Pakistan, they've had financial backing from Pakistan, they've got a political voice through the separatists in Kashmir. These are some of the non-military or the non-violent areas in which terrorists keep getting involved, and that is where the support elements are. Besides that, in the actual manifestation of terrorism or terrorist acts, what the terrorists started off with was a lot of criminal acts, targeting a lot of people who were pro-India. It is not possible to physically protect every single person. They were targeting many of the politicians who were pro-India, forcing the army and the police to primarily deploy in larger strength to protect our establishments. to protect personalities. So a very large number of people went into the protection. That was the whole aim. The other issue with the terrorists always aim at is to win the population's support. The population is the center of gravity always.
Yes.
That is what the army also does. We also intend to. We always try and plan how to take the population on our side. Now, from 1991 to 1996, it was the period in which the foreign terrorists were prevailing. Foreign terrorists here primarily means those who were freed up from the Afghan war, which ran through the 80s. These were people who were from transnational kind of, they were transnational in nature. They were from different countries like Algeria, Egypt, Chechnya, and places like that. They had basically gone to Afghanistan as mujahideen. They came in, large, huge people, particularly 7-footers from Sudan. He had killed all kinds of people that the Rashtriya Rifles and the Indian Army has killed in Kashmir. But for 5 years, this is what their prime thing was. They had no mercy. They had no mercy at all. They targeted, primarily targeted the population of those who were against them. And in the bargain, they actually got the population against them. They mistreated women. They mistreated a lot of local Kashmiris who actually provided them with logistics. They forced themselves into various houses, almost all kinds of criminal acts. And they did not attempt to try and accost the army in the open. It's only when the army went into the jungles or in the mountains and places like that that they came into contact with us. They did not have the kind of courage to come up front and fight against the army. Right? It was they were primarily in the covert. From 1996, this pipeline dried up. There were not enough of these terrorists from Afghanistan left. Then the Pakistani foreign terrorists. The term foreign terrorist after 1996 became only associated with Pakistanis. These were primarily Lashkar-e-Toiba. Yeah.
So, sir, even though Pakistan likes to perpetuate the myth that these terrorists are actually freedom fighters, they are in reality just mercenaries?
You have to understand this, particularly in the context of Kashmir, that there is an old saying, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Right? Now, Pakistan is sponsoring these so-called freedom fighters. They call them freedom fighters. We don't consider any of them as freedom fighters because as far as we are concerned, politically, the end game of Kashmir has already been reached. Kashmir is a part of India, and we say that no one can fight against us for freedom. They can only act as terrorists. They can only carry out terrorist acts. So for Pakistan, these are all freedom fighters, and as far as we are concerned, these are all terrorists. Right? For Pakistan, there are two types of freedom fighters. One are the locals who are recruited by them through money, through the separatists, etc., made to fight against us. We call them terrorists, equally call them terrorists. The second are the foreigners who I was describing earlier, were the mercenaries from Afghanistan who had fought in Afghanistan when that pipeline had dried up. Then it was only the Pakistani. And who are the kind of Pakistanis who are coming to act as freedom fighters here or support the freedom fighters? These are all extremely low-class people who cannot even earn 2 meals a day, not sufficient money to earn to be able to eat 2 meals a day. I have seen the type of people we have captured, the type of people we have neutralized. There are rickshaw pullers, there are laborers. You saw what happened to the terrorists who came to Mumbai for 26/11, if you remember. Most of them were from a very, very low down society. None of them were really educated, etc. So it is easy for Pakistan to pick up these people, recruit them, give them money. You will be surprised, but in my case, I've seen some of the Pakistani terrorists who are actually HIV patients.
Oh God.
They have actually been promised that go and fight jihad because you are going to die anyway. If HIV develops into AIDS, you are going to die anyway. So why don't you do something for your family? This is the money you can take and you will die and go to Jannah. It is that kind of a motivation that they have been doing. I have come across cases where some of the terrorists have been actually prisoners from the death row of Multan and Bahawalpur jail. who were also told, here is your freedom. Go and you got a chance to fight for Islam, fight for Pakistan, fight for, Islamiyat and things like that. So there have been all kinds of terrorists who have come into Kashmir. But let me now just draw upon what happened after 1996. In 1999, the next phase really came. In 1999, Kargil took place, and a major part of the army from North Kashmir was redeployed to Kargil. Because of that, a very large vacant space was created. I was there in Kashmir at that time as a colonel. I remember my particular force of the Rashtriya Rifles took over North Kashmir also. So we had our density of deployment was much lower. That was the time when we suddenly got hit by a new tactics. Although a lot of people don't like to call it by that terminology, but I'm forced to use that terminology. They used to call it the Fidain. Right? The Fidain is actually a terminology from the Palestinian conflict. Right? It's supposed to be a religious fighter who comes in and fights for his faith. So we in the army like to call them so-called Fidain. So we don't really like to call them Fidain. We say they're so-called Fidain. So Fidain is basically, you found in Kashmir all of a sudden attempts at suicide attacks. A lot of difference between suicide bombing and suicide attack. Suicide bombers are those you find in Pakistan or Iraq or in Syria, Afghanistan, who strap themselves with explosives, come and blow themselves up, like the manner in which our late Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi was blown up.
Yes, yes.
In Chennai. Suicide attack is different. In 1999, what the Pakistani terrorists decided to adopt was groups of T2, 3 or 4 would try and penetrate the walls, the security walls of an army or a BSF camp or a civil establishment like the assembly, the Kashmir Assembly, and go inside, kill as many people indiscriminately. Kill whether there are policemen or there are civilians or there are children or anyone, just kill. And then remain holed up there, kill as long as possible. And thereby the army or the police will be forced to go in, more casualties will be suffered. And in the due course of this battle, the terrorists will die, eventually die. So many of these actions took place all over Kashmir. And that is the time when we had to really put our security, redouble our security. All kinds of deceptive measures, like they came dressed as RR soldiers. They came with a combat dress of the Indian Army and putting on RR on their shoulder, and very difficult to discriminate between who is who. And that is the time when we had the double gate system established. We had a proper wall construction of security walls. We also had construction of wire fences all around. Very, very expensive thing. The imposition of cost on India, on the Indian Army, because of Fidain was very, very high.
Yes.
If you remember what happened in Uri in 2016 was a Fidain attack, right?
Yes.
And I had been making noises about the lack of a security wall at Uri right from 2003. Until 2016, there was no security wall because somewhere in the priority of things, you could not provide a security wall to everyone. So somehow we got lost out in that priority, and we found that that is the place where we didn't have a security wall, was the place which got attacked, right?
Yes.
Subsequently, there are other such things which have happened over a period of time. The only time when I find that the terrorists went into a mode of ambushing our convoys was sometime around 2006, 2007, 2008. For about 2 to 3 years, we did suffer a couple of casualties on the roads. The other thing was the rampant use of IED, improvised explosive device, picked up from the Sri Lankan conflict. If you remember, the LTT were the ones who were the masters at this, actually.
Yes.
And they made a very famous film. The Americans made a very famous film after having suffered IEDs in Iraq. The movie was called The Hurt Locker.
Yes,
you must see that movie sometime.
A brilliant movie directed by Catherine Bigelow. It got the Oscars for the Best Picture. And to my audience, if you have not watched it, please watch. It's a brilliant movie.
But I must also tell you that many years ago, when I was in America, the American Army called me to speak about IEDs to them. Or rather, they came and asked me to speak about Sri Lanka to them. And I remember going and briefing people and making use of the word IED, the term IED. The American Army in the year 2000 had not heard of what an IED is.
Oh.
And they asked me, what is the IEDs? And I told them an improvised explosive device. They didn't really appreciate it too much. In 2003 in Iraq, the American Army got so badly hit by IEDs.
Yes. Yes.
That is what led them to make that very famous film, The Hurt Locker. Just to cut it short, the other tactics which the terrorists have used, two or three other things. Number one, suddenly in 2008, we found terrorists taking a back step and suddenly putting mobs on the roads. And we found mobs as big as 50,000, 60,000 on the roads. Very unnerving thing, throwing stones on the army and the police. And it was put out to the world that these are very non-violent mobs. Non-violent from a comparative sense that the army has got AK-47s and these people are only carrying stones. So actually in comparison, they are non-violent. But anyone who faces a mob with stones knows how violent and how difficult it is to handle a mob of that kind. Yes. The terminology the army used at that time was called agitational terrorism. This is agitation mixed with terror. Because most of these mobs also had terrorists within their ranks who used to then target the police or target the army, and a lot of casualties were suffered in the course of that. Yes. And the last bit which terrorists have been using of late is again making use of mobs, that wherever they are holed up in a house, in a safe house somewhere, some of their supporters, the moment they get to know that the army is drawing up into that village or into those set of houses to lay a cordon, they send out a call on the local mosque, the system of the mosque, the PA system of the mosque, or they send out a message through social media and manage to get a couple of thousand people at the spot to prevent the army and the police being able to carry out counter-terrorist operations. Yes, yes. Now that is one of the very, very difficult things to handle also. But the last of them, I think, which is very important, I think in the last 2 years, most people would have heard about it, is the targeting of Kashmiri policemen. Yes. Kashmiri officers of the army. You saw what happened to Lieutenant Umar Fayaz, right? Yes. And you found what happened to Rifleman Aurangzeb of the Jackal Line. It was primarily to impose a sense of fear into the minds of the Kashmiri public, that all this excitement about joining the police and joining the army, the clamor of 10,000 people coming for 100 vacancies, that should come to an end. But mercifully, what has happened is that it has not come to an end. And you find more and more people in Kashmir are coming forward to join the army. Yes. And join the BSF, join the CRPF and the Jammu and Kashmir police. And they realize that life in these services is something very different, where no one questions you on what is your religion and what society you belong to or what ethnicity you belong to. You are just an Indian soldier. Yes. And that is the greatest thing about that. Yes, okay. Yes.
In two separate cowardly incidences, terrorists killed Lieutenant Umar Fayaz and Rifleman Aurangzeb Khan. Both were on their way to be with their respective families in Jammu and Kashmir. The terrorists may have killed them, but they forgot one thing: martyrs never die. Jai Hind. Like I had mentioned in the beginning, I'm in awe of General Hasnain's knowledge, and this session has been no different. Thank you so much, sir, for giving us your time and knowledge. Please like, share and subscribe if you haven't already, and come back for the next video. Till then, meditate, breathe right and smile your way through life. Thank you so much.